Oop, here we go. Hey, Tom. So today's a little odd. Facebook is down. Welcome, everybody, to the Conference Talk Show. We are live on YouTube.
Yes, and we will add this to Facebook at a later time. But what a weird world we live in. If Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, they're all owned by Facebook, they're all down. I think that just shut down like half of the world.
The world may be changing as we speak, but that's all right. You know what? This is why you always have a backup, which is one of the reasons you might hire two MCs to MC your event, especially when you're virtual, because who knows what could happen, which is one of the reasons we started this show way, in the before times, right at the beginning of the pandemic, just to demonstrate how we could do things. I'm Liz Green, in case you haven't joined us before, because now we're on a different platform. And my co-host is Tom Singer. And Tom, let's just jump into this topic today. The topic
Let's
is...
do it. How exciting. I get to be not just the co-host, but the guest.
That's true. Every once in a while, maybe once a quarter or so, we have a show that we don't have a guest. We're talking about things we do.
Yep. I think today we're gonna have some fun talking about the importance of properly having a podcast for associations and how they can use that to drive membership, contact their membership, help drive attendance to their events, and really just use it as a wonderful communication tool.
Right, because right now, just like today, we are looking for more ways to deliver value to association members. So, Tom, why is having a podcast for your association or organization a great way to deliver member value? Well, give me 3 reasons.
Yeah, I've got 3 reasons for you. Number 1 is having a podcast and having fresh content where you're constantly doing new interviews. It gives you a great excuse to regularly be pinging your list or posting to social media with something that is new, fresh, topical, so that you're not just sending out spam to everybody, but you're sending them useful communication that, hey, we have something for you. So that's the first tip. The second one is it's a great way, if you're an association or an organization who puts on events, be them live in person, virtual, or hybrid, a podcast is a great way for you to showcase and interview sponsors, speakers, and other VIPs in your organization during the before time leading up to the conference. During the conference, you can repurpose some of your conference material as podcast episodes, and then it's a great way to do follow-up information following the event itself, keeping people engaged and that community alive. And then the third tip, and this one I really love, is when you interview members from your association on your podcast, it's actually a way of building community because your members who are listening get to know those other members better.
So I think that third reason is sort of the sleeper reason. That is a surprise to me. And I've experienced. But before we dive into those really juicy reasons associations and other organizations should use a podcast, we probably should tell them a little bit about you and why you really are an expert in this area. In full disclosure, Tom and I are in a mastermind together, and I don't know, how many years ago is it now, Tom?
7 years ago.
7 years ago, Tom came to us and said, I want to start a podcast. And we all said, no, that's a dumb idea, Tom. Don't do that. Now, to be fair, it seemed like a distraction from being a professional speaker running the business. Sometimes we are just wrong. Just wrong.
And I knew y'all were wrong, and I love the people in the mastermind group. But sometimes when you get advice, you have to ignore it. And I jumped in and started my personal podcast 7 years ago. And from the first year, it started spinning off speaking gigs for me because people would listen to the show who worked for companies or in associations, and they would be like, wow, he mentioned he's a speaker. We liked his personality. His topic ties in with the theme of our conference this year. And I started getting recommendations from people who listened to the show to be able to speak at corporate and association events. So that was the first good thing that came from it.
Right.
The other thing that came from it is over the years, as I fine-tuned the skills of interviewing people and running a podcast, I'm now the paid podcast host for 2 associations and 1 company. And I'm actually looking to add a couple of more because it's now become an arm of my business to be the host of their podcast to make sure that they have really good shows with good interviews that are providing values for their members.
Well, and not only that, you are very, very well connected in the world of professional speakers who are experts who speak, who are great podcast guests. So having you as the host, you can pull in all kinds of people.
It has been a great advantage for the Digital Enterprise Society and for the Sales Tech Podcast, which are 2 of the shows that I host. It's been a great asset for them because when they don't have a guest, I can reach out to this wide variety of experts on any topic and be able to pull people in as the subject matter experts for the next episode.
Absolutely. All right, let's jump into those reasons. The first one you said is having a podcast is a great reason to ping your list. And don't we all want a good reason? We don't want to be annoying. Tell us why that is such a value to associations and organizations.
Sure. Well, not just so I host 2 association podcasts, Digital Enterprise Society. I'm also the host of the National Speakers Association podcast, which you and I are both members of, their new show, Speakernomics. And so I can speak directly to those 2 associations, but I also see it with a lot of other organizations that when you have fresh content and you have something that really has value and it's not just a fluff piece, but real information, when you send an email or you put it on social media or through your other channels are able to contact people and say, you've got to check this out. Nobody ever says, gosh, how dare this organization send me useful information that's going to help me be better in my job. So even if it's not a total connection for them, if it is real good content, nobody ever gets mad that you've sent them useful tools.
Right.
So that's a great thing, is it gives you a reason to regularly be saying, have you checked out our most recent episode? And using the National Speakers Association, they put it all over their social media. In their magazine, they have a couple of full-page ads saying, check out the new podcast, Speakernomics. But then also myself and the guests who appear go on to the social media or ping our own people and are able to say, wow, this one's extra special. So you end up creating sort of this circle of people being contacted about what's going on the podcast, because if you're doing it right, you're not recording everything a year in advance. You're only recording a week or 2 out. And if your industry, like the speaking and meetings industry, has a lot of changes going on, then being able to do topical things that are tied in right away. When the Delta variants first started breaking, 6 or 8 weeks ago, and really causing the meetings business to have to pull back, we interviewed a medical doctor talking about the real science, the actual science behind what was happening with the Delta variant and why speakers needed to be aware of it regardless of politics. And it was an episode that got widely distributed, not only in the speaker world, but all over the meetings industry.
Right, because it was immediately relevant and actionable information. And as you were talking about that, I thought of another way or another group of people who would really appreciate a reason to ping their list. Salespeople. If you are developing, I know, for example, our friend of the show, Steve Miller, does interview type video episodes for some of his clients in manufacturing. And it's another reason for those salespeople to reach out to the distributors or to the people who are using their products and say, oh, here's something for you. We all know it's a much easier open on that email if it's like, oh, yeah, cool. Or just it shows up on your phone, like here's a new episode, or it shows up on social media, here's a new episode, and you're like, oh, well, the last week was really good. I can't wait to jump over. Like, I know Tuesday is the day that Speakernomics came out. I wait for it to come out.
Another thing that the National Speakers Association and the Digital Enterprise Society both do is they use their podcast as a top of funnel resource for them to help drive membership to them. So we make sure in both of those things that we're not too inside baseball, that it's not things just for members. The podcast isn't a member benefit. While it is a member benefit,
Yes.
the podcast is also a marketing tool for the whole association. So you make sure that you're positioning your podcast as information for everyone who touches your industry.
Well, and that's really smart because in terms of recruitment and retention, you're doing both at the same time. You're drawing people into great content, but also you're delivering content to your members who are already in the fold. So when it's time to renew, they're like, well, but I get such value over here, and you've been drawn in. All right, let's move on to the second reason you said, which is when you feature your sponsors, your speakers, your VIPs, either before, during, or after your conference. That is a great reason. Why is that such a great reason?
Well, because you're able to help promote people coming to the event, whether it's a virtual or hybrid event or it's in person, when you give them little tasters of this is what these speakers are going to talk about. So often when we select a speaker to speak at a conference, we know their credentials. And so we think, wow, they're going to be so great. But the person who's looking at coming, all they see is Becky is the speaker. And they're like, well, I don't know.
Why do I care about Becky?
And a thing that I've found is that if people don't know who the person is, they often say, well, how good can she be? I've never heard of her or of him. And so they make assumptions based on Becky's name or the title of the speech or what the background is. But when they can listen to that person talking about, hey, we're going to talk a lot about XYZ topic, and here's why this is so important to you, and they give actual actionable tips in the podcast, then a lot of people are like, wait a minute, I got to hear more of what she has to say. So now they're more interested in tuning in or attending. Same thing is true with sponsors. All of our friends in the association business struggle for ways with how can we highlight a sponsor. And let's face it, one of the most common things is you pay a big sponsorship fee to sponsor our conference, and we'll let you introduce the keynote speaker and maybe do like a 3-minute commercial on the main stage. And the person comes up and they read their script of their 3-minute commercial about why their company is so great. And they interview the speaker. Well, everybody just wants to hear the speaker. They realize the sponsor needs FaceTime, but they're like, whatever. If you do a full-fledged interview with your sponsor on your podcast leading up, it's not a commercial for their company, but it's a story of how they're committed to serving, how they got into business, what they do to help really channel success for their clients. The sponsors love it because most of them aren't speakers. They don't even want to go on stage and read the bio of the speaker, but it's what they have to do. But being interviewed as a business professional, someone from their company on that podcast really serves as a way to provide value because they have actionable ideas and nuggets that they can share. And it makes them so much more human that people like it. So I'm actually in negotiation right now with an association who wants to do a 3-month podcast every year leading up to their event. They don't want 52 weeks a year. They want to spend the 3 months leading up to their conference highlighting speakers, board members, people who've attended for 20 years, and sponsors so that they can really showcase the whole community of who's going to be there. And they want to use that as a way to drive attendance for it. And then maybe a couple of recaps afterwards, and then they want to put it to bed till the next year. It's actually a genius idea.
I'm flummoxed by that idea in that is a way of using a podcast that is really innovative. It's a really different way. Oh yeah.
If they do it right, then people are going to be excited next year, and you can do advertising like it's coming back, kind of like a TV show does, right? We have all these TV shows that we love to binge watch, and when you and I were growing up, they started every September, they ended every April or May, and we knew it. Well, now some of these shows take 2-year hiatuses. They're on what I call,
you're like, when are they coming back?
And so when they're coming back, be it Netflix or Hulu or ABC or whoever, they start doing a whole bunch of promos leading up, like, what's going to happen? We've been away and now they're back. And so you can build excitement for the podcast and for your lead into your next event. So you can get really creative with this. Your podcast doesn't have to look like everyone else's podcast with like 8 questions in a lightning round.
Exactly. I do want to circle back, though, to something that you said. And I agree with you. One of the best results of an interview with a sponsor is revealing the human as the sponsor. You get your logo up there, you get your, here are the products, this is how we serve. But those moments where you find out, oh, the reason they're in this business is because they had this experience and they felt called to do this, or here's this thing over here that they do that's really cool that nobody knows about. And I know I probably have talked about it before. My favorite example is the, pest control conference that I emceed, the maker of the rat poison that talks about how they are saving the birds and the turtles in the Galapagos. That's a story that doesn't come up when you're reading your script on the main stage or you're standing in the booth in the vendor hall when we do that. It's humanizing. It's cool. It gives people something to talk about when they have that face-to-face or virtual face-to-face. That's really important. That in terms of delivering value, that's something highly valuable to sponsors, which
and sponsors like it, and then they can use it as part of their own marketing. They can say, oh, I appeared on this podcast. And when they do things that aren't just a commercial, and they send that out to their own list, 2 things happens. One is they get to see that humanizing piece that you talked about.
Right.
And the second thing is their whole list is now exposed to your association and possibly your conference and why they should be attending. So there's so many layers to how an association can use this as a way to feature people and feature content. And here's another great example, is you can actually take content from your conference and reposition it back as an episode of the podcast. So you and I were involved with this for the National Speakers Association. The National Speakers Association, their conference Influence under your direction, used 3 MCs, not just one, but 3 very specific different personality traits or skill sets of MCs to highlight what an MC does. And we did a 25-minute panel on what makes a great MC. And I hosted it as a live, we called it Speakernomics Unplugged. I hosted it live on stage. We interviewed you and the 3 MCs, and it was a dynamic, really good conversation. We then took that audio recording and we made it an episode of the podcast, and it worked as an on-stage panel, and it worked as a podcast episode. And so that's one of the things that if you have a podcast, you can be taking your content from your event, turning it around and sharing certain snippets with your entire list who maybe weren't able to attend your conference. So there's a lot of things that associations need to be thinking about when they're creating that, on who they can highlight, how they can highlight it, and how they can intermingle their conference and their podcast.
Right. And there was such a great synergy using the podcast in that manner. It elevated the podcast for people who maybe didn't know that even existed. And I think it made a better panel on the stage. Because it was in a different format. It was sort of cool that we were doing a podcast recording at the same time. So instead of it's a panel, it was a cool panel. Also because you were the host of it, which always is a good thing. All right, let's move on because we don't want to go too long today. This is this is the sleeper tip that by interviewing your members, you are actually building community.
Absolutely.
Talk about that. That is so cool.
I see this all the time with all of the podcasts I host, is that when people listen to a great interview, again, we're not talking about the same 8 questions every week with a lightning round. We're talking about an interview where it's designed around the guest. And when the guest says something, the host then goes deeper and asks them more and asks them questions, sort of peeling back those layers. The people listening feel like they get to know that host and what happened, or that guest, excuse me. And what happens is that people then within the organization, when they see them at a conference or they're on some sort of a Zoom call and they get paired up during the breakouts in the Zoom breakout, they're like, oh my God, I heard you on Speakernomics, or I heard you on the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. And now all of a sudden they feel a kinship to them because they know about their dog or their bird or their brother or whatever they said during that. And it helps them then start a conversation with the person who is the guest. The guest, of course, is flattered, because who amongst us isn't flattered if somebody says, oh, I heard your interview. You were awesome. I loved this little particular piece. And all of a sudden they start the spark of more of a friendship. So it's one of those things that people don't think about. But for an association to have a podcast is a great way to help your members get to know each other better if you're highlighting experts within your organization.
I can't even believe how we are both very well connected within our own association. But there are people that you have interviewed where I'm like, I have known this person, Robert Kennedy. I have known this person for a very long time. He is amazing. I did not fully have the picture of how cool he really is. And without that opportunity, I may never had.
Yeah, a podcast interview gives you a great chance to really see into the soul of somebody if the interview is well done. And I think that is one of the things that people are overlooking who aren't doing podcasts. And I talk to a lot of associations who say, oh, we tried it and it didn't go over well. And I say, oh, well, how did you do it? And they just threw something up there. They didn't have any strategy. They didn't have any thought. They didn't think about all of these different ways that they could intermingle everything they do in the association back with the podcast and to the podcast. So I think you have to be thinking out of the box and really big picture. But if you do it right, you're going to find out that you have a top of the funnel piece that's going to help you drive membership, and it gives you a reason to ping that list, and it's creating community, and your sponsors are feeling better. If you work for an association, just those 4 things should make you be like, wow, we want that.
Right. And there was a lot of ands there. It is an economical way to accomplish all of those things. It is not a huge event where you have beverage and food and everything that you have to come in. It is not a huge marketing campaign, although you're going to market it. It is an economical way of delivering member value that is repeatable over and over and over and over again, which don't we all want that? We want
and it can be either less of an expense or cash flow positive if you build something that's worthwhile and you actually get sponsors of the event. So this can either be done through your hosting platform where, just random brands are hosting podcasts. It's becoming more and more popular. Or you can have the host do upfront reads or mid-roll reads where they're highlighting somebody in there and they pay for it. So they're either curtailing some of the costs that do exist with doing this in the correct manner, or if you really work it, you can make it cash flow positive.
Also something we are all looking for, cash flow positivity. Indeed. Those were great reasons that everybody should consider having a podcast to deliver member value. Hey, Tom, I know we talk about where they can find the conference talk show all over the place, but if somebody is thinking, maybe we should consider doing a podcast, and maybe we shouldn't necessarily reinvent the wheel. Maybe we should know somebody who actually knows how to build the wheel and drive the wheel. Where would they find you?
So I'm happy to talk to any association about what I've learned. This is still somewhat new for associations. I mean, podcasts have been around a while, but very few, I think, are doing a great job with this. And so I'm always happy to have a conversation. They can find me at tom@tomsinger.com is my email, or just if you go to tomsinger.com, you find out all the details. And here's the thing. You may want to consider, it would be great if it was me. I'm looking for a couple of more clients, but it may be smart to consider, do we use a professional host for our podcast? One of the mistakes I've seen a lot of organizations make is they say, well, we have a person on our sales team or our head of membership who has a great personality. but then that person leaves and the whole project falls down. Or they say, oh, we're going to get a member. And I know that, I am a member of the National Speakers Association, but the other shows I host, I'm not actually involved with the company or the association.
Mm-hmm.
There's no politics involved. If you have a professional
Right.
host who is doing it, it keeps people from going, well, why did they get to? So
Right.
having a professional host who has experience interviewing people goes a really long way.
Well, and I think another reason that having a professional host makes sense is that your sales person, your member, your whatever, have other priorities. They have other things that they're supposed to be doing for their job. Hiring a professional host, it is their job. They are going to get the episode done. They are going to make sure that it is done in a timely manner and in a professional manner. It doesn't get pushed down the to-do list because it is indeed at the top of the to-do list.
And much like you and I talk about a lot, the best conferences out there utilize a professional MC. When you see somebody who says, oh, our MC is going to be our head of membership, I pretty much know, while that person may be great, it's not going to be like, wow. But if they say, hey, we have a Liz Green or we have Jeff Savilico or whoever, you just know that event is going to be a little bit better. There's something to that in this world of podcasting.
Indeed.
If you have a professional, experienced host, I think it just goes farther and people tend to tune in a little bit more. I mean, we tune in to watch, Anderson Cooper on CNN, not Bobby from accounting at CNN.
Well, who knows? Maybe Bobby from accounting is really great, but in all likelihood, Bobby from accounting has to get the quarterlies done and doesn't have a lot of time.
And he's probably really great at accounting, but not at hosting an evening news show, right?
Exactly. All right. So if you wanted to find us to talk about podcasting or having MCs, you can go and watch us live on Mondays at Facebook most of the time. Always.
Not this week, because Facebook was down.
Right. Well, maybe we're going to have to be on YouTube more regularly. You can find us on YouTube at conferencetalkshow.watch. And where else can they find us?
Conferencetalkshow.com has all kinds of information about working with Eliz and I to make your events all that much better, because we would love to be the hosts, the MCs of your conference, either individually or as a team. And then you also can learn about our Conference Hero Award at conferencehero.com, where we honor people who are really making a difference in the world of meetings. So if you know somebody who's gone above and beyond the Call of Duty the last couple of years, go over to conferencehero.com and nominate them to be a conference hero.
Yes, indeed. We will be back next Monday with another great guest. Maybe on YouTube, maybe on Facebook. We'll let you know. Thanks for joining us today. Have a great rest of your week. See you soon.
Thanks, y'all.